My name's Dave DeBow, founder of MoneyPartnerFormula.com, and this show is built for everyday real estate investors who are actively doing deals and looking to scale using other people's money. So if you're an active real estate investor and you want to get featured on this show to talk about your own real estate and capital raising experiences, then just go to daveinterviewyou.com. Now let's get rolling with this episode, and remember to subscribe for daily interview content.
All right, guys, welcome to Property Profits Podcast. I'm your host, Bryce Kaminski, filling in for Dave DeBow. And have you ever wondered what it takes to leave a 17-year corporate career and achieve success as a full-time real estate investor? Well, today, my guest, Lane Babbitt from Southwest Louisiana, is going to help us out because he's mastered the art of scaling a rental portfolio through the BRRRR method and strategies, as well as the direct-to-seller marketing, which is huge. Lane, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Bryce, thanks so much. I'm excited to be here and to chat a little bit with you.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing I think people are going to be curious about is like, why did you leave 17 years? You know, most people, if you're down that rabbit hole and you're moving in that direction, there's usually a few golden parachutes that people are holding on to those strings as they approach retirement. So, you know, can you share us the story of how you transitioned from your corporate career to that full-time real estate investing? It had to have been scary.
Yeah, scary in my head, not scary once I actually did it. But I think the real question is, why did I let it go 17 years before I did it? After making that transition. So, you know, I was stuck in the whole American lifestyle of get good grades, go to college, get a degree, get a career at some professional firm, work hard, get a promotion, get more stress, make more money for your employer, and sleep less at night. And something hit me one day that said, you're doing it wrong. And I picked up Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which I think a bunch of people will give significance to, read that book, and my mind made an extreme shift, instantly turned upside down. And I looked at myself in the mirror and said, I've been doing life wrong. And I've got to change this. I'm not building a future for my family. Had a young kid at the time. I'm not setting myself up to be able to help my family future down the road. And I'm just going to live in this rabbit hole forever if I don't change something. So I jumped into basically 5 or 6 months of walking around with earbuds on every single hour of the day, learning Bigger Pockets podcast, every podcast I could find, every book I could find on real estate investing. Was scared to death, but said, I've got to try to do this. And then I remember the evening, I was sitting on the floor with my wife in our 1-year-old's nursery at the time, and said, hey, I want to buy real estate, buy some rentals. And sitting there with my wife, she said, you are not draining our savings account to buy rental properties. And I said, okay, I'm committed to this though. I know this. I've figured out that this is the path I want to shoot for. Had a boat that I loved at the time, loved fishing and outdoors. I said, I'm going to sell it and take the money. Did that. And then the rest is history from there, man. That was in 2017. Started a little slow with a partner. And then the last 4 years, things kind of clicked. Started doing direct to seller marketing, and 2021 took the leap and quit my W-2. It's the best decision I've ever made. We'll never go back. I'm unemployable now.
Yeah, well, that's what ends up happening when you go into real estate is you become what my mentor used to say, gainfully unemployed. You're not employable anymore because it's hard pressed for someone to match the reality that you create yourself.
Yeah, you get tired of trading time for money and decide that you want to trade value for money or for, progress or wealth or whatever it may be. And the last year that I worked at a W-2 was very tough because I went into that knowing that, hey, my wife and I have drawn a line in the sand, and if I hit this, we're going to quit and I'm going to go full-time real estate investing. And as we got closer to that point in reaching that goal, my wife just finally said, you don't need to hit that goal. You just need to quit now. And she pushed me to it. And I said, okay, I'm ready. Let's jump.
So what motivated you to choose the direct to seller marketing as your primary strategy for your deal acquisition?
Man, in all the learning, the podcast, the research I would do, because I would just dive into every rabbit hole I could find. All the people that I was seeing that were finding the better deals consistently were finding things direct to seller. This was, I mean, I started this journey in 2017, 2018, and there's a fair amount of competition for people just buying stuff off the MLS. So you're not getting a really good deal. I was working a full-time W-2. I had to hire people to go do stuff. I'm not going to do the work myself. So I needed to create a margin so that I could have for profits. And so I said, I've got to start finding leads and make my phone ring, and just started digging into it, joined a mastermind coaching group that has just helped take off from there. So once I put those systems in place, the wheel just kind of keeps spinning at that point.
Well, and then I think, I was having that conversation with, I'd spoken to him years ago about real estate, and that's when he was starting in real estate. And then he kind of transitioned into this contracting business because they like doing that business, and they've grown that business up. And business owners always understand lead flow is important. But people who come from a W-2, they've never been in the lead generation unless you were like in the sales and marketing department.
Yeah.
Really, you have no exposure to like what keeps the pizzas going in the oven. Like, yeah, it's the pizza flyer that went out that gets the pizza in the oven. No flyers, no pizzas in the oven. So you gotta find a strategy that works. So when you look at that direct to seller marketing, what are some of the most effective tactics that you could, share with the audience that, someone starting out can maybe avoid doing something and do that instead?
Yeah. Number one, consistency. When you pick a marketing channel, there's lots of marketing channel. You direct mail, SEO, pay-per-click, cold calling, texting. A lot of these are kind of starting to become obsolete because of new regulation. But whatever you pick, go in on it and be consistent with it. Because if you stop the marketing or the consistency of the marketing for a brief period, it has larger ramifications on the drip into your funnel. You've got to keep the funnel full so that you keep the pipeline stacked with deals. And, it takes so many, and every market's different. So it takes so many deals or so many leads to get to a deal or acquisition or a property that you wholesale. So you've got to be consistent. And one of the hardest things for me here was follow-ups. I would be so busy that I didn't have the time for it. I would let leads sit, and I wasn't following up with them as consistently, as often as I should. And when I started to do that, it seems like it's not working at first, but it just builds momentum. And you've got to just keep the conveyor belt going. Just don't stop. Keep going with it.
Yeah. I remember this morning dropped the daughter off early, like she wanted to be at school early. So I was like, okay, cool. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna do some direct to seller. I'm just gonna drop some marketing at these houses. And got the call. For people listening at home, sounds like this. We're both 70 something. We have too much stuff in our house. We just got taken for a ride by the government and we're short on cash. Does it sound like there might be a sale there in like a BA neighborhood? I just put a letter in the mailbox, guys. Like, just put it in the mailbox.
Yeah. Can I
And
meet you
you
today?
never know. Yeah. And they called me later today and I got a meeting with them early next week. So
That's great.
it just goes to show that you can't expect the MLS or the realtor.com to deliver, because what you were saying is really important for people listening, is that you can get a deal on realtor, but you might not have the margin that allows you to to hire someone. And I'm always explaining that to homeowners and be like, yeah, I can pay you an extra like 15 grand, but then I got to do it myself and I'm not in that business. So I need that discount so I can actually have a business, hire someone to come in here and paint the thing. So with the buy and hold strategy, why do you prefer it over other strategies in real estate? Some people are diehard flippers. Some people are all about the multifamily, huge buildings. Why do you prefer the buy and hold burr strategy?
So I have been since day one, I have had a vision that I'm just going to set something up and grow something for the future. And I can go flip a house today. And I do flip a few houses a year. I wholesale a few houses a year as well. But if I can take a property and get into it at 75% ARV, or the value of the property once it's renovated, put a renter, I let them pay down my principal every month when they pay me rent. I have equity the day that I refinance it, because I forced appreciation by renovating the property and updating it. So I've got instant equity that if I ever need to cash into, I can get some portion of that back out if I have to quick sell it. I'm a little bit more protected against a market cycle, because as long as I don't cash in that equity, it's going to sit. Sure, it might go up and down with property values, but that over time is going to go up. I'm going to get a little bit of cash flow every month. So I've got mailbox money every single month. And now I'm going to get appreciation because I bought a property that I renovated, and it's going to go up in value over the next 10 years. So I've got all these ways that I can cash in on a property, as opposed to buying it and selling it as a wholesale. That's a one-time cash in. Buy it and flip it. That's a one-time cash in. That money comes and goes. That's very transactional, and I've got to keep doing it. I do that. That's how I feed myself and live off of my income. I flip a few houses in wholesale, but over the long haul, I keep more properties than I do that with, because I look at it and say, if I just keep this property 10 or 15 years, sure, I might have $60,000 or $80,000 of equity today, but in 10 or 15 years, that might be $250,000 in equity because of all those reasons I just mentioned. And they paid down my principal. It went up in appreciation. So I really look at the long game, and I'm one of those that wants to delay the instant gratification for the big goals in the end.
Yeah, and that's one thing I always tell people when I'm doing my acquisitions classes. I'm saying, look, don't get comfortable in the beginning part of real estate, which is wholesaling and flipping. That's a great way to like break into the market, cut your teeth on some private marketing and things like that. But you're never going to get wealthy in the short game. It's all
You get
about
rich, not wealthy.
Yeah, and even then, like how much can you even keep? Up here in Canada, they're raising the capital gains to 60 something percent.
Oh, wow.
You don't even get to keep half anymore. Like they're like,
Yeah.
no, you can't even have half. So when you look at it, it is, I like what you're saying, is like you take a little, you keep some stuff on the conveyor belt, the treadmill of real estate, which is wholesaling and flipping. But then it's like, okay, I'm going to put a couple of these on the shelf here. And if I need to, I can pull it out. Are you finding that you're able to make money on the refis, or are you having to park a little bit money like most people these days?
So I've been across my entire portfolio. I've been very lucky that I can almost always 100% cash out. It is getting tougher these days, 100% for sure, because in the market that I'm in, South Louisiana, we're close to the Gulf of Mexico, and we all know that hurricanes have been hammering the Gulf Coast the last several years. So insurance rates here have way more than doubled over the last 4 years for me on properties that I purchased 4 years ago on new acquisitions. So those costs, coupled with higher interest rates, make it a lot more difficult to cash flow if you pull everything back out. I've been able to do that by doing a little bit of a shift, because typically I would go to my local bank and say, hey, let me get a 4.5%, 5% loan on a 20-year term or amortization schedule, and we'll pay this sucker down quick and still make cash flow. But now I'm having to transition that to these larger DSCR lenders where I can get a 30-year term loan or amortized loan. So it lowers my payment monthly, but I get a fixed rate interest rate. I get a little bit higher interest rate, but it's fixed. So I'm still able to get that cash flow. I'm still able to burr everything out. It makes it harder. There's a lot of deals I pass up now that on paper, the numbers look great until you throw in those financing terms and you're like, this is kind of negative cash flow. I don't really want to own that. So either I just pass it up and it's not a deal, or I try to renegotiate and get it at a price that maybe I can wholesale it or do a flip on it. So it slowed down my acquisitions a little bit, but there's still some opportunity.
Are you investigating the whole subject too on some of these older interest rates, or is that not really part of the thing?
I've not done any with it. I've looked into it pretty hard. I know some folks doing it. I would only feel comfortable doing that if I had a lot of equity in the deal. I still think that equity is your protection against market shifts and market cycles. And if you've got to dump a property, because I don't want to be in something just because it's got a good interest rate from the
Yeah.
prior, from the seller. I want more than that. I want to try to hit those four key factors I talked about before, where I've got that equity, the cash flow, the principal pay down, and the appreciation. I want to hit all four if I can. And it's a little bit harder with a subject to, because a lot of those deals I see that come across my plate or that I try to pitch to a seller, they're in a low to no equity state, and that's why they can't take my cash offer sometimes.
Yeah. So let's pivot a little bit to the whole management side. Like everyone thinks, oh, I'd love to own 100 rental properties. Oh yeah, what about if all 100 hot water tanks need to be changed, or all? How about if half of the
Air
tenants move
conditions
out?
right now in the
Yeah, you've
South.
got 50. Well, what's interesting is I think, correct me if I'm wrong, in your state, air conditioning is like a standard of living.
Oh,
You have
you've got
to
to,
have it.
man. It's miserable without it.
It's kind of like furnaces in Canada, like air
Yeah.
conditioning completely optional here. Open your windows. It's only going to be 2 months where it's hot, and then the furnace though, you must maintain heat. There's nothing in our codes that say you have to
So,
maintain
funny
temperature.
thing about it, in the state of Louisiana, you don't have to supply air condition in a rental property, but you'd be dumb not to, because no one would rent it. It's
Yeah,
just miserable if
window
not.
shakers and portable things leaking on your
Yeah,
floor.
that's right. Rotting the window seals.
Yeah, rotting it or falling out or getting stolen in the middle of the night. It's someone who didn't have one down the street. So let's talk about this. How do you manage 55 single family rentals? What sort of systems and processes do you have in
Yeah.
place to do so?
So that's currently in transition. We just I had an assistant that's been working with me for a couple years now. She's great. She was handling a lot of admin stuff for me, handling a lot of lead management items for inbound direct to seller calls.
Yeah.
And she wanted to take on more of a role, a bigger responsibility, more hours. And I said, well, spending a lot of money on property management, I really could stand to take that back in house and save a lot of costs there and try to manage things more efficiently and save on reducing vacancy, reducing damages in a property. So she is coming on full time now, and she and I have just taken all of our properties back in house as of April 1st. So we're just in our second month here of transitioning that over. So it's fully in house now. I was able to give her a raise. I'm able to pay her some bonus structure on the things that she does, and it helps her out greatly. She's a stay-at-home mom, so it gives her that flexibility, and it gives me that flexibility and capability to have a partner working with me that we're managing them in-house, save those costs from a management company. So that's another thing that was kind of driven by interest rates and insurance too, because with those costs going up so quickly, and I can't control those. I can't raise rents fast enough to offset the insurance increases. I have to reduce my costs to offset that until natural progression of rent rates increase over the next few years to catch up to it, hopefully, right? So that was a big step that we had to just take a leap of faith and jump in and do it.
Yeah, I mean, you're not the only person subjected to the interest rate and the rising insurance. So naturally you're going to see that cost, usually, maybe not usually, but I think naturally you're going to see that cost being passed on to the consumer. There's nothing you can do. Like, why would you do the property? Why would you hold it if it's negative? At least if it pulls out even, then maybe you can do it. So, primarily through the BRRRR method, you're scaling your portfolio, but the strategy is good when you have capital. So can you talk a little bit about your network of private lenders and how you're able to cultivate those relationships?
Yeah, that's been key. That's been huge. It was really slow in the beginning for me, right? Because
Mhm.
I had a W-2, so I was really bankable, had a decent paying job. So I
Right.
can go to the bank and say, hey, I've got another rental, but I can only do one or two at a time. It was a much slower cycle.
Mhm.
Um, I could only go take out so many loans against my job, right? Against my income. And randomly one day, I always heard about this mythical, magical private lender. And randomly one day, thankfully to my W-2, I was at a local business development event at a chamber meeting, sitting across from this random gentleman, and we started talking about real estate. And he had done it for several years, flipped a bunch of houses, and after several more lunches and just kind of getting to know one another, he said, "Hey, I might be interested in lending on one of your deals." And so we did that at first, and it worked out great. And he said, "Let's do it again. Let's do it again." And over time of me, I'm pretty bad at it, but me just kind of getting the word out on social media whenever I can remember to do it, because I'm so bad at staying consistent with that. Other people saw what I did, and they would see me talking about or hear me talking about how I work with other private lenders. And I just, people from my network, that's all it is. It's people that I've met over the years, people that I've known for many years would reach out and say, "Hey, I've got some capital. I'm interested in talking about what you're doing with these other folks." And so, now at this point, for the last couple of years, I've had, a little over $1 million at work almost at all times. So I can work with these private lenders, pay them a really good return, and it's just peer-to-peer lending. Pay them a really good return. They get a mortgage on the property with a first lien, just like a bank. They get a personal promissory note. They get written in on the insurance, so they're protected in the same ways a bank would be. They lend on the property. We go and either flip it and then pay them back with their interest and their initial capital, or if it's a BRRRR property, it usually these days, most of my lenders that I'm working with want to see 6 months of seasoning. So they know they have 6 months of guaranteed interest. Once that 6 months comes up, we go ahead and refinance them. And as soon as I refinance them, they're asking, "Where's our next deal? When's the next one we can put to work? How much is it? When do you need it by?" I thought it was going to be a much more difficult thing in the beginning when I started working with these private lenders. But at this point, after building that trust, that's the number one thing I've learned with them is trust. And they want to work with someone they trust, and they want to work with someone that does what they say they're going to do. Most of the lenders I work with, they don't even want to see pictures of the property. They don't want to see my underwriting on the property. They don't want to see any repair estimates. How much do you need? How much is the property worth? And when do you need it? That's it. So, just continuing to build that network with people that have money sitting on the sidelines that want to make a better return has been hugely and immensely beneficial.
Well, I think too, like the direct to seller approach allows you the buy prices that they're not really scrutinizing you. They're just like, "Yeah, it's definitely below market. You got it again. You did it again." So, when you look at some of the challenges in increasing the cash flow for your rental properties, what, how have you been dealing with that whole insurance rate thing? Are you just not cash flowing on some of these things now, or what are you going to do to kind of combat that?
Yeah, everything I have is cash flowing. I keep a pretty good tab on that. Cash flow has definitely dropped on some of them because of the insurance. For instance, I had a couple of properties in a flood zone. I'm selling one of them today at 3:00. Going to sign papers, going to cash in on some of my equity I had in that one. The other one, the insurance has gone up even more because of flood zone. So once the tenant moves out of that or doesn't renew, I'll probably fix that one up a little bit and put that one up for sale too. So I'm starting to transition my portfolio a little bit and say, "Hey, let me just make sure that what I'm going to keep is a little bit higher quality asset. That way I want to hold this for the long term. Even if my cash flow insurance goes up a little bit more, my cash flow drops back a little bit more, and I'm, maybe not making huge returns on them every month. It's going to be the type of asset that you want to keep for the next 10 years because it's going to get massive appreciation." So a lot of that is just kind of reassessing the portfolio. Luckily, everything's positive cash flow. Being able to do that by some of the strategic management, taking it in-house, and who knows what those next steps are. I think one of the next things I'm looking at is hiring a full-time maintenance person that can really cut costs on having to sub stuff out.
Yeah, because it's like one call to show up on from an outside person to your property. There's like a service call fees. But if you've got a guy who's like roaming around and he's doing this, that, and that, well, now he's in-house, and it might collapse a few time frames. But I'm sure you're future proofing your rentals when you're building them out, right?
Yeah, so
waters, making sure that they're
right up front, absolutely. Yeah. I've known some people over the years that have said, "Hey, I can go buy this property for 50 cents on the dollar and throw a renter in it just like it is and make $500 or $700 a month cash flow in our market. But then they get a few years into it and they see, oh, I didn't replace that roof. I didn't replace that HVAC unit. The water heater's really bad. When I buy a property, day one, I want to go in there before I put a tenant in place. I want to renovate and update those mechanicals as much as I can. I want to get that property so that hopefully for the next 5 to 7 or 8 years, I don't have big mechanical issues. I don't have lots of calls other than, hey, we broke a window or something minor that is easily fixable and isn't some huge outlay of capital, because that's a huge suck that you cannot predict when those costs are going to come unless you can try to get out front of them and nip them in the bud before they even happen.
Yeah, I remember a lot of times we would just go in when we were doing the refi business. We would just go in and like, it wasn't even a question. Are we changing the furnace? Yeah, it's part of the business model. Like, I don't want to deal with it. We're going to do it no matter what. Like, maybe it's a year old. It's just the business model. Let's change all the problems before they happen. So, when you look at new markets expanding into the wholesaling and flipping, how do you evaluate and choose these new markets?
So I'm currently working on making an expansion neighboring markets, actually. Just working on a partnership where we're going just west of here, Beaumont, Texas, Southeast Texas, that region, kind of up to Houston. So it's, for me, that's a smoother transition. I've got very reliable partners that are there. They understand they're already in the flipping business and they're already in buying properties. They just want to gain that direct to seller lead flow. And I've been able to develop those systems. It's a very similar type market. So we're not having to completely learn a new area. It's not very far off from evaluating properties in my local region. So it's a lot more of a seamless transition for me. Yes, I think I know many people that jump markets around the country, do really well, very successful at it. But for me, I mean, this seems like a really seamless transition to just implement the same strategy and keep expanding that market into similar regions that are going to be comparable.
Yeah. So, yeah, definitely the Dallas and the Texas market is one that a lot of people are talking about. So what, what are your future plans for your real estate business? You going to keep growing the portfolio? Is there like a end game to this thing?
I wish I knew an end game, right? I'm a wandering entrepreneur sometimes these days where, one day I want to, hey, let's sell half of the rentals and pay everything off and just own them in cash. And then, a few weeks later, let's own 300 of these single families. And then, I don't want to I know this much. I don't want to turn off my single family generating machine right now. It can just plug out a few of these a month, and I'm not some big organization. It's me and an assistant right now. And we can plug away at 3 or 4 of these a month, no problem. And they just generate long-term wealth if we just keep doing the system. I am in a GP in a multifamily. I do like the multifamily space and still evaluate properties when they come along. I've just not been chasing them as hard recently with the market conditions, but there's deals out there. So, over time, I do know that it is very beneficial to benefit into the larger commercial asset. So I definitely want to get to that, but right now, I just can't give up that lead flow machine that works, chugs out capital, chugs out more single families. We're going to keep going with that space for now.
Yeah, and the other thing too is like you can't sell one part of a 40 unit building. So as cool as multi is, you're not going to get like the appreciation over units. Like if you had 40 units in one place or 40 single families across the city, appreciation on the single family is going to be more than the per unit appreciation. So, well, it might take more work. I think you got the right strategy. And I was going to say too, I've seen a lot of people deviate from what made them successful and end up costing themselves a lot of money. So I really like your answer where you're just like, I'm just going to keep doing the system. Very much like Moneyball, the movie, just, base hits and you win the championship. So what advice would you have for someone looking to transition from a corporate job to real estate investing?
Look, leverage your W-2 if you've got one while you get started. Build something on the side. Wake up at 3 a.m. This is exactly what I did. Wake up at 3 a.m., work on real estate till it was time to get the kids off to school and go to work for your W-2. On your lunch break, you're making phone calls and working on that side hustle for real estate. When you get off, you work on that side hustle for real estate. You're going to be a lot more comfortable for the time being while you're in that W-2. You know that you've got some income coming in. You're a lot more bankable. So leverage it while you've got it. Build something to where you say, okay, I'm ready to jump off. I think a lot of people say, hey, I'm just going to jump off the deep end, and that can work, but it's also failed for people too, right? So, you know, there's a little bit different strategy for every person. Everyone has their own risk tolerance. But for me, I really am appreciative and grateful for the W-2 that I had when I was growing it. The other thing was, one of the biggest benefits for me was when my wife had 100% buy-in in my vision. So if you're married or you have a spouse or a girlfriend, or, you know, make sure that whoever's on your team, in your corner, that they're bought in, because it's going to lift a weight, an invisible weight off of your shoulder and let you dive in. For a couple of years, I just lived with guilt, knowing that, hey, I'm spending more time away from my kids, more time away from my wife, putting more work on her. And that ate at me a little bit. And unbeknownst to me, because we didn't have that good conversation about it, she was okay with it. And so when she vocalized that and verbally discussed it with me, and we shared our goals on it, huge benefit, huge leaps forward, and just took the weight off my shoulders.
Mm-hmm. And I like what you said there too, is like, leverage the W-2, or if you're Canadian, your T4. Don't get too excited and quit your job. I mean, unless it's like really bad and it's killing your spirit and all that.
Right.
The bank doesn't care about your feelings though. So when you go to the bank and like, I had a job, but it was hurting my feelings and I still want a mortgage, they'll be like, well, unfortunately, we don't take feelings here at the bank. We take pay stubs.
Yeah.
So, set it up, get a couple, max out your personal mortgages. I think you can do 10 each in the United States is something to that effect. But max it out before you have to get into those larger loans that are slightly more expensive. And because they'll never be, and you can probably speak to this too, is like, once you become self-employed, you might as well be a drug dealer. Like they're gonna want to see everything, all the
Yeah.
paperwork, like what do you own? And it's nice that you have assets too, because some people get into the short game flipping and wholesaling, and you have no assets. So there's nothing for the bank to even say, like, okay, you put a lot of money through your account, but you've got actual property, so that then maybe they look at it and say, self-employed with a bunch of property, maybe we can give them some loans at least.
Yeah. And a lot of the lenders here say, we want to see a 2 or 3 year track record of what you've done or what you've been doing before we use that to lend against for you, or to evaluate you and you being lendable or bankable.
Yeah.
So that's why leveraging your current profession, if you're there, is so beneficial when you
Yeah,
have it.
just start small and pick something that maybe doesn't need a whole lot of work, and head down to the Home Depot and put a little bit of work into there, but sitting on it for 5 or 10 years, and you'll be gainfully surprised at what you can do. So
Yeah.
um my favorite last question, what's your unfair advantage? What comes easy to you that other people find difficult to do?
You know what? Something again that I will give credit to my years as an environmental consultant and professional career, managing chaos. So, when you've got a bunch of projects going on, and I don't have a full-time project manager, property manager, I mean, we have a property manager, but there's still lots of inputs, lots of contractors. I feel like I'm really good at managing large scale projects and juggling contractors, juggling invoices, juggling material orders, and just putting the key pieces in place when they need to be there and letting them do their thing at that point. So I definitely give credit to years of working as a consultant to learning how to manage that type of asset or that aspect of a project.
Yeah, riding the real estate dragon. Like, where's it gonna go? What's happening? Oh, someone stole the hot water tank that we just put in. Well, get a new one, put it in again.
It's a coin flip every day.
Yeah, for sure. So if people want to connect with you, they want to find out more, what should they do? How do they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Facebook, Lane Babin. Instagram is at Lane Babin, LaneBabin. And you can also shoot me an email anytime. It's lane@sell2bpp.com.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Lane, I really appreciate you stopping by and letting people know that the corporate world, while important to your success, um, can be leveraged and exited with grace. So I really appreciate your time.
Bryce, I appreciate your time too. This has been
No
fun.
problem. Until next time, guys, we'll catch you on the next episode.
Hey there, I really hope you enjoyed that episode. And as always, if you want to listen to more daily interview content, make sure you subscribe. And if you're an active real estate investor and you're doing deals and you'd like to get featured on this show, then just head over to daveinterviewsyou.com. Now at moneypartnerformula.com, we help real estate investors to create a process for predictably getting capital so they can do more deals without relying on hard money lenders or the banks. We do this by building them a private capital marketing system. Now, if you want help turning yourself into a big money capital attraction machine, then book a call with our team to see how we can help. Just visit moneypartnerformula.com to find out more. All right, take care, and we'll see you on the next interview.